Okay, so let's get into it. This is part 2 of our school journey. We last left off talking about how my daughter was left hooked up to her feed and put on transportation, which is something that should absolutely never happen. Um, so I was just kind of talking about how the administration's response was just kind of like, well, she wasn't hurt, so obviously everything is okay, right? Not so much. Unfortunately, that was just a one-time event. It only happened that one time and it never happened again, so that was positive. They were able to keep that from happening again, so that made me happy. However, this was in August when that happened. There wasn't anything that really majorly happened between August and the next event. There were a few times that she might have been sent home with like food in her hair or something like that, which isn't my favorite thing, but you know, it's kind of one of those things. It doesn't bother some parents, but it bothers some parents. So, me personally, I don't like to see that. I don't send her to school with food in her hair, so I really don't want her to come home with food in her hair. Like, that's just not my ideal situation. Excuse me. But, like I said, nothing major was really going on until February. It was in my classroom, and somebody comes down the hall and they're like, hey, Jennifer's button fell out. And I was like, how did her button fall out? That's weird. I checked it this morning. It was fine. So I go down and, they're trying to put the new button in. They're having a really hard time. They show me the old button and the balloon is fully inflated. Fully inflated. Like they even checked to see how much water was in the balloon. And I put 2.5 mLs of water in her balloon and there was like 2.3 in there. So I'm like, I don't think her button fell out. I'm pretty sure it was pulled out. Because a fully inflated button doesn't just fall out. It has to be pulled out. This is the point of the balloon. The balloon is there to secure the button. So if a fully inflated balloon allowed the button to fall out, that means there's either not enough water in it, the size of the stoma has gotten larger, so you need a new button. There's something else going on, right? And none of those things were going on with her. Her site is immaculate. She doesn't have any granulation. There's no anything around her site. It's clean, okay? Her button sits nice and flat. When it's inflated, it spins. It doesn't pull out. It's great, okay? It took us a long time to get here, but right now her site is really, really good. We're trying to get the new button in, and as much trouble as they're having, that told me that the button had been out for a while, because her stoma starts to close up after about 30 minutes of not having the button in. So anytime that her button is dislodged, we have to get a new button in right away, because otherwise her stoma starts to just close up. And so it wasn't happening, and it was just hurting her so much. I'm trying to put the button in. So I took her to the emergency room, and she almost had to go to the operating room because they put a catheter in her stoma to try to dilate it, and it wasn't working. So surgery came down. They said, well, let's try a little bigger catheter and give it about 30 minutes and see what happens. So thankfully, the bigger catheter was able to dilate her stoma enough for them to get the button in. So they got the new button in. We were good to go. She didn't have to have surgery, which I was really glad about because I did not want her to have to be under sedation. Just for that, So again, the response that I get from the administration is like, oh, well, that's great. She didn't have to have surgery. No, it's not great. You guys pulled her button out and sent her to the emergency room. Like, what's great about that? That she didn't have to have surgery? Like, that's worst case scenario. And the thing about it is, like, they just were not willing to take any responsibility for it at all. Because I guess they just feel like you don't know anything, right? And I've been caring for her with a G-tube for 9 years. Okay, so I'm pretty knowledgeable about how they work. And her button has come out before. The balloon has burst on her button before during a feed, and it actually has fallen out before. I've seen that happen. I know what that looks like. So when that happens, there's a pile or the pool of formula somewhere because the pump's gonna keep running. It's not gonna error because everything else is fine in the line. The food is still going through. It doesn't know that it's not going into the stomach. So that's going to keep running, and that formula has to go somewhere, right? So when her button came out, she didn't have formula on her clothes anywhere. She didn't have formula on her chair. There was no formula on the floor. So I'm like, this is weird. And so I said, well, was her pump on? And they're like, well, yeah, her pump was on. It couldn't have been. It couldn't have been. Because if her pump was on, there should be some formula somewhere. Because if the button was still like in her shirt, her shirt should be soaking wet from all the formula that leaked on it. So we had to sit down and we had to have a little talk about like how things were going to go going forward and how we were going to make sure that this didn't happen again. And you know, I wasn't very happy about it, but, you know, I said, you know, we'll try to work this out. You know, we'll try to make this work. But something's got to, we got to get things together, right? So then less than a month later, again, I'm in my classroom. Somebody comes down and they're like, hey, we just pulled something out of Jennifer's throat. And I'm like, you pulled something out of her throat, excuse me? So I go down there, and I was actually getting ready to head down there anyways because I heard her crying. Like she's just like screaming at the top of her lungs. I know when it's her crying versus somebody else crying. I know her crying, right? So she's just crying and crying and crying. So I guess what happened was the way they found out that she had something in her throat was they had taken her to try to go eat lunch. She wouldn't eat, obviously, because there's already something stuck in her throat. So how's she going to eat, right? And they took her back to the classroom. She kept getting more upset. Then she started having increased secretions coming out of her mouth. And then she started to cough a little bit, and then they could see the foreign object in her mouth. So they did pull it out, which was the right thing to do, right? Nurse checked her, you know, to make sure her vitals were okay and everything like that. But, you know, when I was talking to the administration, you know, their kind of stance was, well, we wonder where this came from. What do you mean you wonder where it came from? It's the middle of the day. It came from your building. What are you talking about? Like the idea that like she just put something in her pocket from home and then just like slipped it in her mouth when you weren't looking. No, she doesn't have that much self-control. If something goes in her hand, it goes in her mouth immediately. There's no like I'm gonna save this for later and I'm gonna pull it out when nobody's looking and I'm gonna pop it in my mouth. That's not gonna happen. So it came from your building. This literally happened at maybe like 12:30-ish. So this happened in your building. This happened on your watch. So the idea that it happened at my house or on the way to school is ridiculous. That she would just have something sitting in her throat all that time, and she'd be breathing fine, mind you, with something stuck in her airway, and then it just wouldn't present any problems until the middle of the day. That's crazy. That doesn't even make sense. So anyhow, stay tuned for part 3. So we'll find out the resolution in part 3. Well, a partial resolution in part 3. Stay tuned.